So welcome to Menable Matters with me, Steve Whitton, and Emma Shaw, one of the co-founders and board advisors of the Menable movement. We are going to bring you some Menable moments.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so Emma, we've got a few questions. As we've been rolling out the Menable movement, some stuff has come back our way in the
I bet
form
it
of
does.
feedback, but also questions. Is it just for men?
Is it just for men? What a great question. So there's obviously in the title a clue to that. However, I think one of the things we've had lots of conversations around is the fact it is focused towards men's mental health and all of those things, but actually the benefit of this has a massive ripple effect within the industry on all genders. And that's particularly important, I know, to you and to me, because what we're not looking to do is to single people out. We're actually looking to provide something that is missing right now that actually fills a big gap. What's your thoughts on it, Steve?
I think that, the Menable movement started as a program, if you like, or a support service for men of a certain age in the male dominated arena that is the automotive industry. What's emerged quite clearly is that actually women are very interested in being a part of it as well. And also the age group that we were aiming at has expanded. Add to that the fact that there's also another movement, which is the Automotive 30% Club, which is aiming at getting more women into leadership positions by 2030. Bring all of that together, and actually Menable is about diversity, gender balance, mental health, and just overall inclusion.
Absolutely great. And I think that's the thing, the message that we're really trying to get across here, that it is about inclusion. It's not about exclusion. And I can understand where people might get sort of curious or triggered by the title because it's called Menable. And I think, interestingly enough, for me as a female, what I've observed is that the people who have been perhaps curious or triggered by that have mostly been women. And in fact, we've had a couple of private responses from women, one of which has said, they wouldn't get involved in it because it seems divisive, and someone else has said, well, this is not very inclusive. And actually it's the complete opposite message that we're trying to get across here. And I feel quite strongly about this as a woman, because there are a million and one places for me as a female in business particularly to go and get support from other women. There are billions of organizations and clubs and memberships and networks out there that are predominantly focused at women, and nobody has ever really questioned that as a divisive or exclusive thing, as opposed to being inclusive. So why would it be an issue for us to provide that safe space for men? I think that's severely lacking. And whilst I can understand why people might question it, and it's great for us to have these questions because it allows us a space to actually talk about this stuff, I think we need to look at, is there a double standard here perhaps that's quite unusual, that when we try and provide a place for men to actually examine how they are emotionally, their emotional and mental health, that becomes an issue for people.
Yeah, well, overall, I mean, the industry is male dominated, and that's what we were aiming at, was to get men to open up and talk honestly and truthfully about what's going on. And the byproduct of that is, of course, that makes the environment a better place for women, and hopefully will attract more, and that they'll stay as well.
Completely agree. I think if we fill some of these gaps, it's going to be beneficial for absolutely everybody. And
Yeah,
I personally have no issue with that whatsoever.
brilliant. Thanks, Em.
Thank
Okay, so the next question: change is hard, Emma,
you.
and
Changes
we
are
know
hard.
that we've been accused in certain elements of the industry of harboring dinosaurs. So what can we do to address both of those issues?
Well, I think first of all, the harboring of the dinosaurs is interesting, isn't it? Let's be nice to the dinosaurs, because we can understand that change of the kind of scale that we're talking about and the disruptive nature that we're talking about is not going to be easy for people who have been in the industry for, you know, in lots of cases, decades, and have seen it, you know, evolve in a way that it has elements of it that's still not evolved, I guess. So, you know, modern car technology, very, very, you know, fast paced and fast moving, but the culture itself seems to be very stagnant and very still and very slow moving, which I've been really shocked about since I've got to know a bit about the industry. So yeah, let's be sensitive to the people that are struggling with some of this stuff. But I think one of the things that, you know, has been really interesting for me is that there's been a real barrier that's come up in many different ways that all centers around, well, it's too hard to change, it's too big of a thing to change, so why should we bother?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely right. And I think you know, there are elements of the industry that are actually fearful of change. And you mentioned that, you know, technology has moved on at a pace, and our behaviors and beliefs have sort of stayed where they are. And you know, a lot of change is being driven by the changing expectations of customers. And what the pandemic has thrown up is that mental health issues were always there under the surface. And you know, more and more people are now hopefully happier about talking about their anxieties and their issues and their concerns. And what we as an industry and the leaders in this industry need to do is be prepared to support them and help them. And it could
Absolutely.
be that some of those dinosaurs are the ones with the biggest issues, and it's just they've kept a lid on it for so long.
Yeah, I think that's really quite possible, and I completely agree with you. It is difficult to, you know, to kind of be accepting of the fact that things need to change, and to feel hopeful or positive or energized or enthusiastic about it when it feels like such a big tide to turn and such a big mountain to move. But you know, just because change is hard doesn't mean it shouldn't be done, and just because it's been like this for a long time, or that's just the way we do things, you know, we all know that that's not an ideal mentality to have. And you know, you look at some of the big movements in the world, like you know, race issues, sort of sexuality issues, and even, you know, the change of the roles of women and men from the 1950s, for example. You know, we could have said actually it's too big to change, or, you know, having women get the vote, that kind of stuff. It's too big to change, it's too set in stone, it's too, you know, it's too just the way we do things. That's not an excuse to not try and change things. And yes, it may take a while, but if you're really committed to it and everybody's on board, then it will move a lot faster than if we try to resist it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, the old phrase, isn't it? What you resist persists, and we ain't giving up.
Absolutely right. We're definitely not giving up.
No,
So
100%.
like this.
100%. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Em.
Okay, Steve, so my turn to ask you a question. So what about this concept of throwing people into a room and running a training session and hoping that that's going to change things? What do you think about that?
It ain't. It won't work. It won't work. I'm afraid to say it because I've made my living out of this for 20 odd years. The typical approach in the automotive industry when training needs to happen is that it quite often is, let's throw a load of people in a room and train them on something, quite often which is about box ticking, reaching a standard, hitting a requirement, doing what you have to do. You know, the compliance thing is the perfect example of that. You know, we wouldn't be doing compliance training anywhere in the industry if we didn't have to do it. So the industry has got a history of doing what it needs to do to get away with stuff and to tick boxes if it has to, because I believe personally that we don't and we haven't had a learning culture in our industry. So I think it will have some effect if you put managers into a room and train them, but the effect will be short lived. And if it transfers into the business, it probably won't be sustainable, because most of those managers will be there, wondering why they're there, how long the session's going to be, when do I get the certificate, and off they go. Because they're not going to go back into an environment that welcomes the changes that need to be made for this to become a cultural change event.
Absolutely. And I think you and I are both very familiar with the concept of being employed by a client or working within a business where you get told to go and run a workshop with a section of the that organization's population, and you get that pushback all the time. Well, this is all well and good, but my leaders are fighting against what you're telling me to do all the time. And is this training happening from top down? Are our bosses getting this training?
Yeah.
It's very hard to be put in that position when you know that they absolutely should be involved in that whole learning culture.
Yeah.
And let's also not put too fine a point on the fact that Menable isn't about just putting workshops out. It's a whole change, and for change to really happen, that has to be demonstrated and role modeled at every level, especially from the top down. And people can become very resentful when they're thrown into motivational style learning events, and they absolutely know that it's just lip service and a waste of time, because as soon as they go out back into their roles, like you said, all of the forces are fighting against that. And it doesn't matter how much they want to change and how much they believe in what you're telling them, if that is not backed up at all levels, then it's just going to be a waste of money and time.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But someone in the organization somewhere will be able to tick a box and say, well, we've delivered that, so we're covered. And the reality for me is, I wish I had £1 as an automotive trainer for every time I ran a course and somebody started an attendee started at that course and said, what time's this over, mate? I've got a meeting at 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to be there. They found out the night before or not long before. They've had a 2 or 3 hour drive, and I know that's changed now because lots more is done virtually. But that's the mindset. They don't want to be there. They've got too much else to do, and training is an unfortunate distraction from the daily work, to be honest. And I also wish I had £1 for every time somebody sat on a course and said, when are our managers doing this? Because
Yeah,
this isn't about us. We get it and we understand, but when are our leaders actually coming on this program as well?
absolutely right. And the way I see it is, it's a bit like people are like elastic bands. They have to be stretched to be useful. But the problem is that if you throw people into a training and the environment doesn't support that change, you're going to keep stretching it, and it'll either snap, or the ends will be let go of, and the elastic band becomes useless. So
Yeah.
it's just a real shame when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. The whole thing just concerns me, that and I won't let us get involved in it. This propensity that we have in the industry that, oh yeah, we need to train all our managers. So we either hire a room in a hotel, or we get a room in a dealership, which is typically a meeting room that's, upstairs tucked away. And 10 managers turn up, and most of them, as I said, don't want to be there. It's an unnecessary distraction. They're looking at their watches, looking at their phones. And I can just envisage that if you're trying to impart important information like this, you are going to get people in there who are going to kick back and say things like, oh, so what, you want us to become bloody counselors now, and you want us to properly, put our arms around our teams and all of that. And our answer to that is going to be yes. It's
Yeah,
exactly what we want. But I am not going to stand at the front of a room with 20 people in it and tell them that. That's their leader's job to tell them that.
absolutely right. And I think that this is a whole other question that we need to answer, isn't it? Around, well, how do we do that in the right way? How do we make sure that we put our arm around people in the right way and not be fearful of what the results of that will be?
Yeah. I feel another Menable moment coming on him.
Me too, Steve. So, Steve, I've got a question for you now for us to shoot the breeze about. So where does Menable sit as regards the levels of an organisation? Where's Menable actually going in at?
Well, 100% in the organisation from the top, from the absolute top. You know, our ambassadors and people who've stepped forward to want to represent and work with us are nearly all people from a middle management or junior management position, because they recognize the need and they can see that something needs to change. But in order to do that and affect that, Menable 100% needs to start from the top with a pledge from the CEO or the managing director.
I can completely agree with that. How easy do you think that is to do, though, as an organisation?
Well, we like a challenge, because we don't think it is going to be that easy. This is about mindsets, and you know, the industry is geared up for mass production and the achievement of objectives and targets, and the CEOs and MDs and people like that are the people who are at the top of organizations, you know, leading that results driven culture. So it is about getting on board those people in the industry who have a commitment to saying, yeah, the well-being of our team is the organization's responsibility, and that sits with the CEO.
It absolutely does. It's a duty of care, really, isn't it? It's not just a position and a title and a salary. It's a duty of care
Yeah.
for people. And I think that, you know, the things that I foresee as perhaps challenges is that it, like you say, it's a mindset shift, and it's actually very difficult to sit and question your own leadership style and approach. And we will be asking leaders to hold a mirror up to themselves and ask those difficult questions of themselves and each other. That's not going to be an easy process. Sometimes that's going to be a challenging conversation. That's going to involve some pushback, because people are going to want to defend their, you know, the way things tick in their organizations and their industries, and whether they actually have a part in that. And you know what, the analogy that springs to mind for me on this is that we all complain about the traffic, but what we fail to recognize when we're complaining about being in that traffic is that we are part of that traffic ourselves.
Yeah,
You know?
100% know what you mean with that. Yeah. Yeah, we moan about the school traffic, but we still leave home at 8:15 in the morning and expect it not to be there.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 No, you're
Well,
absolutely right. And we touched on in a previous Menable moment, we talked about, you know, rooms full of middle managers who don't want to be there. Now, to put that into context a bit further, I think that dynamic changes if the CEO and MD are fully behind this, are leading it and driving it within the business, and the message is absolutely clear. This is not a training course. This is not a tick box exercise. This is about understanding the change in culture in our business. And these aren't massive changes. These are just about being empathetic, compassionate, and having humility and showing understanding for the people around you.
completely agree with that. It's, you know, it's a journey, and it's probably a long one, but actually those micro interactions are, they're not overly difficult. They are certainly doable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's what we're there for, to help them with that.
You're right, we are.
So, Emma, a key question for Menable is what's in it for employers? Now, I know that you're not from the automotive industry, so your perspective on this is hugely valuable because you've seen it with a fresh pair of eyes. So, what do you think is in it for an automotive employer to get involved with Menable?
That's a great question, and I have found it very, very interesting to discover that automotive is actually a fairly unique industry compared to the ones that I've been involved in. And you know, I've been in lots and lots of different industries: telecoms, financial services, social housing, manufacturing, digital, you know, the list goes on. And whilst there are some organizations that have issues with their culture, I've never experienced it being a sector driven thing. So to discover just how old-fashioned and behind automotive are in terms of culture and approach and um, mindset was really quite a shock to me. And I think one of the things that perhaps automotive has to wake up to is that if things don't change, then there's going to be so much talent leaked out of that industry. And that's probably happening in swathes already, from what I can gather.
Hmm.
I know it's quite for want of a better word, incestuous, in the sense that once people get into that industry, they tend to move around and move around and move around, often for their whole careers. But that is going to start to corrode away now, or erode away, and people are going to just say, I've had enough of this. I'm going to see what else is out there, and go elsewhere. And I think the people that are more likely to do that are the ones that are actually the best talent. So I think that's quite a risk, in an industry that's meant to be very innovative in lots of ways and very forward moving. I think it's a real risk to just accept that people might just go elsewhere and try something else.
Yeah. Well, one of our sort of phrases is that we are giving you back effective employees. And what that's about is creating a framework within a business that people find it okay and comfortable enough to be able to talk openly about the issues that are affecting them. Because in the vast majority of cases, when we talk about mental health, this isn't about people who are in crisis. This is about people who are stressed off the clock with the usual day-to-day stuff. And if they don't feel that they can approach their managers, their leaders, their business to offload, to get help, to get support, then they're going to bury that in their own selves and take it home and not be as effective as they could be when they're in the workplace. And
Yeah.
we see examples all the time of people having excess amounts of time off, or people having excess amounts of time in the business because they can't take time off, or people sort of zipping in and out and they're on their phones all day because they're dealing with stuff, at home and stuff like that. So this
Mm.
for us is about creating the environment where we can give you effective employees back.
Definitely. And I think it also, when you get people that are struggling, or lots of people who are struggling with their mental health and the balance, and it's affecting their lives, and it's affecting their performance, or then they're having to go and take time out because of sickness. There's a stigma that's created around that of, oh, they've just played the stress card. And you start that in itself, actually coming forward and admitting that you've got an issue can in itself be a worry, not because you're admitting vulnerability, but that you are worried that you might be labeled, or put under this category of a stigma, that you're playing the stress card, or you're sort of taking the mick out of the situation. I just think that's really sad. If you created an environment, an organization where people were genuinely emotionally connected and motivated, then they would have no need to do that anyway. So that should never even be a worry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for that, Em, because that came from one of our leaders who actually said if you start caring too much for people, that they actually will take the proverbial. And of course, that's the very point of why we created Menable in the first place, because that mindset exists within managers, and that mindset will mean that your people won't come forward and talk to you. So, we're creating the opposite and giving you back effective employees.
So, Steve, we've talked a lot about workshops, training courses, and whatnot, but we also talk a lot about how Menable we're not a training company, and we never will be. So, if it's not about putting people into a workshop, then what is it about?
Well, I mean, the easiest thing in the world would be to run workshops and training courses. And that's the background that you and I have come from and is our default position.
Mhm.
But what we recognize is that in order for this to affect cultural change, it needs to start at the top. And I don't know any leaders or CEOs who are going to invest in the first instance huge amounts of time on going on courses. So, this is about workshops with them. It's about one-to-one coaching, executive coaching. And our pathway that we've created over the last few months has made it very, very clear that on one side of it, we have all of the things that we can provide as resources. So whether that be podcasts, newsletters, bespoke materials, conversations with people. And on the other side is all the stuff that we do for free, which is the, referrals to counselors and coaches and therapists, if that's what's needed. And bang in the middle of all of that, one thing that we will be asking member organizations to do is to appoint a mentor within your, at least one mentor within your business, who can be the people who gauge the temperature of well-being within your business, not to be first aiders and be there on hand, although if that's, they feel they're up for that, then fair enough, but to be the people who give the CEOs proper honest feedback on what is the well-being temperature in the business. And from that, we will then work with them to create, the right workshops, the right interventions. Some of that may be a course, but it ain't going to be us going in doing that first.
Yeah, that's good to hear. It's actually pretty refreshing because, yeah, like you say, we're both from sort of learning and development or training type backgrounds, but as we both know, that is not a complete solution. It's only part of the solution. One of the great things about Menable is that, we have a fantastic network of people that can partner up and provide a real, complete, multifaceted solution. But I think one of the key things here is about conversation, and it's about communication. And I mean proper communication, not putting posters up and hoping that it just magically changes things, not expecting to weave a spell in a day or a half a day or a couple of hours,
Yeah.
or even a month or a year. It's about an ongoing mindset of growth and learning and, challenging each other.
Yeah.
And I think there's some incredibly exciting things we can do. You've had some amazing ideas around what we could do as a, as a movement, in Menable for people. And it's just, it's incredibly exciting. And I think what's also great is that we're really open to conversations with the organizations we're working with around what they want from us, what ideas they've got, and it feels really collaborative already.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge strength. We're not pushing solutions off the shelf onto people. It's not a one size fits all scenario. We make it work and do the work that it needs to do according to the situation that we're in.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I do have some ideas, don't I? I feel some more Menable moments coming on him.